Hi everyone, it's Toby and thank you so much for joining me for your 10-day sketching challenge. Now the idea of this is 10 days of really simple but useful and short videos where I give you suggestions to build your art skills and your confidence and get you ready to join one of the more in-depth courses on sketchloose.co.uk with myself. So what's the point? The point is to really get you sketching a little bit every day, get you having fun and get you understanding what I think are the key concepts in sketching. Now, in this first video, we'll be talking about loose lines, and it's all in the name, isn't it? Sketch loose, loose lines. Of course, this is a key topic for us to cover. If you haven't already though, just remind you to go back to the introduction and just pop up a quick photo of where you're at the moment, your current sketching. I'm sure that the comments will fill up really quickly with loads of examples. You're not alone. And it's an amazing thing to be able to literally see, I was here and now, after just 10 days, I'm here. I'm feeling so much more confident. My art is looking more confident. So do pop your little photo up there. Just a quick sketch. It could be any little quick sketch. And let's see how things change in the next 10 days. And with that, let's start this. So loose lines. And now we can move over to my paper. So I've just got some very lightly textured watercolor paper. It's in a little homemade sketchbook. I've got 10 pages in this sketchbook for my 10 days. Loose lines, what are they? Well, lines, obviously, are things we use to connect. They're a type of mark. So a circle is a shape, but it's made up of a circular line. A square is made up of either one long line or it could be 4 or 2 shorter lines. So what are loose lines? If lines are just things which connect, what are loose lines? Well, normally in sketching our lines are indicating something. So this little circle could be an apple. And a line which accurately depicts that apple will be quite accurate. It will be quite sort of representative. A loose line is where we move away from trying to be super accurate and we start thinking about other things. So instead of our apple looking like this, our apple suddenly could have little random swirls and breaks. And obviously this is a loose line. Suddenly our square might not be quite so rigid. Our square might have a bit of fun, a little bit of play to it. It might develop a corner, you know, all these kind of things. This is loose. So a loose line is simply a line which doesn't rigidly stick to the expected path or doesn't rigidly stick to a path which is representative of the scene or the object in front of you. Instead, a rigid line conveys something extra, maybe emotion, texture, character, and becomes a little abstract and quite playful. So 3 tips for loosening up your lines. Number 1, where are you holding your pen? So if I hold my pen like I'm going to write, well, I can then write very neatly, which is great. All of my lines are, well, my handwriting is not great, but they're not loose. They're not super loose. If I hold my pen all the way back here, can I write neatly? Even for me, no, I cannot write neatly. And the same goes for drawing. If we draw a house, and I'm holding here, it's actually quite hard to be loose. If I'm holding really far back, it's really hard not to be loose. So experiment with where you are holding your pen. With a fountain pen, it's easier to be loose than with a fine liner for that reason, because if I hold my fine liner right at the back, I don't get much ink flow. I need to be much more upright. So tip number 2 for loose lines, and it sounds silly, but it's really important, is think about what you're using. For example, I could move on to a brush pen. Now with this, I'm going to be able to get really loose lines. But the looseness is also going to be how bold they are. They can go from really thin to really thick. So suddenly our looseness isn't just in the trajectory of the line, it's also in the boldness and in the sort of type of mark, the roughness versus the smoothness. Now putting these little chaps to one side and just bringing back the fountain pen, which is my favourite sketching implement, let's think about tip number 3. Tip number 3 is sketching loose isn't scribbling. It could be, but for me it isn't. Sketching loose is a conscious decision. So we can't just decide we're going to sketch loose and then suddenly it will happen. We need to think about it. So let's just sketch something. And this is your challenge for today. Let's just sketch something that's sat in front of us. And of course, in front of me is always a coffee mug. So let's sketch it loosely and I will explain what I'm thinking about as I do it. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm thinking what are the key shapes. So I've got an ellipse at the top. Now I could draw that ellipse as a really neat sort of object, or I could get a bit of character into it. And I'm just doing that by wobbling and purposefully introducing little bits of randomness. These little bits of randomness are just me going, oh, I'm a bit bored now, let's go up there. Then underneath we've sort of got a rectangle with wobbly edges, which is the ellipse, of course, at the top and the bottom. And again, we just keep veering off. And then at the bottom, we've got a little lip, and we can just make that up by going backwards and forwards. And we can come up the side here, and there is our shape. So all the way I was thinking, don't just go straight, have a little wobble, go random, do something extra, do something interesting. Same with our handle. Well, we've got this sort of basic shape, but why follow that shape? Why loop it all the way around? Why not just introduce that little bit of randomness? And then even just by being very random, we can build up that loose line into something quite effective. Now there's one more shape missing, and that is this kind of semicircle of coffee. Super important to get that coffee in every day. And there we go. Doing that, we now have our very simple coffee mug. But it's not just a coffee mug. It's not just a simple sketch line of a coffee mug. It's got my character in there. It's got my fun in there. So have a go yourself. Take that apple into a funky apple. Take your coffee mug and make it loose. Take a flower and make it really interesting. Do whatever you want. Do it quickly. 5 minutes, more if you want, and see how that simple practice helps you develop your sketching style.